Welcome, everybody, as you're coming in from the waiting room there. Thanks for joining us this afternoon to learn how to make some cables here. Darren is your teacher there on screen, showing off some of the things we're going to be teaching you in today's class. My name's Claire. I'll be hanging out in the chat here to answer any questions directly or to forward them to Darren. So if you do have questions during class, please just leave them in the chat here in Zoom and we'll get to them that way. I'll also be putting the handout there in case you didn't receive it, and I'll put a link for mobile device users as well. A reminder that this meeting is being recorded, so you can watch it back as many times as you need to, and that will be available tomorrow afternoon on michaels.com/classes and on the Michaels YouTube channel. And now that we've got all of that taken care of, I will let Darren take it away.
All right, welcome to class. We've got a lot to cover today, so why don't we just jump right in and switch the camera to the view of my hand and go ahead and get started on a few things. Okay. Did we switch the view?
Where are your hands now, Darren?
Yep. It looks like I'm still on the main screen. Is it switched to view?
I see your hands, Darren.
Okay. You know what? I see myself. Wait a minute. Okay, never mind.
We've got confirmation of that in the chat there as well. Thanks,
Okay.
Michelle.
Somehow I had myself pinned to the main screen and I thought it was working. Sorry about that. All right,
I am going to ask you to speak up or move the microphone closer. You're a little muffled now.
Perfect. How's that?
Still not great.
How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
All right. So today we're going to learn about cables, and cables are they're a lot of fun to make. They look very, very hard and very, very impressive. But the secret about cables is, and as knitters, we can share these secrets, but we don't want to tell non-knitters because actually they're not so hard to make. So when you learn how to make cables and people are all very impressed and very excited about something you did that's so complicated and hard, you're just going to say, thank you. Yes, it was a lot of work. You're not going to say, oh, it's much easier than you think. So that's the knitter's secret. Making cables, as you can see my background here, I laid a sweater out that I purchased. I did not make this. You're going to need cable needles, and we have a couple of different choices. There are many choices. I like these hook-shaped ones best because the stitches you'll see here in a minute, but the stitches rest on the hook here, and then it hangs down out of the way. A lot of people really like these straight ones with just this little bend in the middle. The stitches kind of rest in that little bend, and then you can knit right from the end of it. And this one is straight, but it has little notches in it, which help to keep your stitches from sliding. And there are other kinds you can do as well. Here's a little swatch I have. And I just, you can do, instead of a cable needle, you can just use a double pointed needle if you don't have a cable needle as well. So many different ways, different types of tools. You could use a chopstick if you don't have anything else and you just want to practice. So there are lots and lots of different ways of making cables if you don't have a cable needle handy. So here is an example of a cable. And I just wanted to point out a few things about cables. So as I'm talking about them, it'll kind of make sense what I'm talking about. So we've got our cable, we've got our stitches going straight up. So this is just kind of normal. These stitches are going straight up and then they turn. So you can see how they turn this way. And that's where the cable comes in because we're twisting our stitches, we're moving them. So right here, and that's called a cable twist or a cable turn. And as you can see, one is curving out this direction. It's curving out to the left, and this one is curving out to the right. Okay, and so there's a certain way we have to do that. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a few minutes, but just a little bit about that. This one curves to the right, and this one curves to the left. Okay. So let's start with our handout. I don't know if everybody has the handout, but cables are created by knitting our stitches out of order. And cables can be worked as few as 2 stitches or as many as you like. A cable worked over 6 stitches, for example, might have 3 stitches transferred to a cable needle and held to the front or the back of the fabric. The following 3 stitches will be worked, then the 3 stitches that have been held on the needle will be worked. So basically, we're just knitting the stitches out of order. We're taking some off our knitting needle, letting them rest, knitting the 3 stitches that should have been behind them, and then we're knitting them off of the cable needle. And you'll see that here in a few minutes. Cables are often written as twists or crosses. For example, the first exercise we're going to work, 2 cables where we cross 3 stitches in front of 3 stitches or behind. These stitches are written as 3/3 LC and 3/3 RC. So as you can see here, that is kind of how they're written there. But what we're going to look at is this little pattern right here. This little pattern right here. And it says to cast on 18 stitches. So I don't know if you guys are going to try to knit along, but if you want to, go ahead and quickly cast on 18 stitches. The first row, you're going to purl 2, knit 6, purl 2, knit 6, purl 2. Row number 2, you just follow along. You're working on the back side of your stitches there. Row number 3, that's where all the excitement is going to happen. And one thing about cables, when I first learned cables, I thought you were going to have to do something on every row to make the cables look really nice. But for the most part, you're only doing something new, like every 3rd or 4th row. Some cables, it might be every 10th row. So most of the time, you're just knitting like normal. You're not really doing anything different. And then after we do our cable turn, it stops giving us even numbers. It just wants us to remember that row 4 and all wrong side rows, you will knit the knits and purl the purls. And that's really common with cables, how it's done most of the time. So let's see what these crazy cables look like. Okay, so what I have here is a swatch I worked up earlier, and I cast on my 18 stitches, and I worked my rows 1 and 2, and now I'm ready for my cable twist. Okay, so let's look here at the pattern. So row 3, I'm going to purl 2, and then 3/3 RC. Now that sounds crazy. We don't know what to do there, but if we look back up here, right here, it tells us 3/3 RC, and I'll show you how to do that as we go. So I'm going to do my purl 2. And then my 3/3 RC. Now, what that is telling us is the 3/3 is telling us I'm going to be crossing 3 stitches over 3 stitches. So that's what the 3 and the slash and the 3 are telling us. And then the RC, that means it's a right cable. So it's leaning to the right. And you have to make sure that your cables are leading in the right direction. They can either lead to the right or to the left. And if you want it to lean towards the right, so let me show you how to, first of all, you have to slip 3 stitches, and you want to make sure you're not twisting them from your working knitting needle to your cable needle. So you just slip them right over without twisting them. And then if you put them on that hook part, then they're not going to fall off. Now, this right here, as you can see, I'm holding it in front of my work. But for a right crossing cable, you want to put it in the back of your work. So a right crossing cable, you always put it in the back of your work. And a memory crutch to remember that is, I'll be right back. So if you say to yourself, I'll be right back, you put it in the back, it's going to turn right. So right and back will be your little clue. And then you need to make sure that your yarn is in the right place. Hold on a second. Get my tail out of the way. And now I have to knit 3 stitches from my working needle. And this is just like normal, so nothing fancy is happening here. So 1, 2, 3. So that was easy. All right, so now what we have to do is we have to knit the stitches off of our cable needle. So we're going to let our left-hand needle just rest for a minute. And one thing I like to caution people here is when I'm getting ready to knit my stitches, you want to take 1 second and stop and make sure you're looking at knit stitches. Because when I was first learning, a couple of times I twisted my needle backwards and I was looking at purl stitches, and that's not correct. You don't want to twist your needle backwards. So just take 1 second and make sure you're looking at knit stitches, because I'm going to be making knit stitches. I want to be knitting into knit stitches. And then now I'm just going to place my yarn in the correct place to knit. And then simply just knit 3 stitches off of your cable needle. Knit all 3 of them off. And that is my first cable turn all sorted out. Okay. And we're going to look at that in just a second. Now I'm going to do my purl stitches. So with this pattern, once we've established our knits and our purls, we're going to maintain the same pattern throughout the piece. So whenever you see a knit, you're going to knit, and whenever you see a purl, you're going to purl. All right, so next I'm coming to 3/3 LC. And what that means is we're going to have 3 stitches crossing over 3 stitches that lean to the left. So when you transfer the stitches onto your cable needle, you want to make sure that you're basically putting them tip to tip, and you want to enter the stitch as if you're going to purl, because you don't want to twist them and take them off without twisting them. So usually when you slip a stitch, that's the correct way, usually. So slip 3 over, and then I like to let them rest on the hook. And since I'm going to be having them lean to the left, I have to do something a little different this time. So I'm going to put it in the front, and that will create the left leaning. And so a little memory crutch about putting it in the front, you can say, I left the front door open. So if you left the front, that helps you remember that if you hold it in the front, it will lean to the left. And then position your yarn in the correct place for knitting. And I'm going to knit 3 stitches just like normal, nothing fancy here. And don't worry, we'll go over this more than once. Okay. Now these are going to, you don't want these to slip off by mistake. So sometimes I give it a little extra needle so that they don't slip off. And I have to position this so I can knit in the correct place. So I'm going to bring it up here, and then I'm just going to knit these stitches off. And when you're doing a left-hand twist, it's easy to do it right because you're looking right at their stitches. You're not going to twist it as, if you turn it like this, you're going to tell something's wrong. So just make sure that you're knitting into knit stitches, and just knit 3 stitches just like normal. You see my needle slipped out of there. So just quickly, before anything happens, pop it right back on. And then to finish this row, I'm going to do 2 purls, which is the finishing feature of this row. All right. Now, every time you do a cable twist, you need to stop and look at your work and make sure things look right. And nothing looks right about this, right? It looks crazy. It looks all twisted up. It's like that can't possibly be what he wanted that to look like. But the first row usually does look a little questionable. Frequently in knitting, a lot of things don't look right until you get 4 or 5, 6 rows in, and then you can start to see how the stitches are shaping up. But if we look at it carefully, we can see that this row of stitches, these 2 rows, and then the ones kind of twisted behind, are moving in this direction. They're not going straight up. And we've got this little group of stitches coming out. So that's coming under. So we can see something happened there. And if we look here, these stitches, these 3 stitches are moving in the opposite direction. So we can clearly see they're going on a diagonal. They're not going straight up. And if you kind of look here, you can see these stitches are kind of stretched and coming from underneath. So it looks right. It looks perfect and it looks right, even though when you get to this point, you'll probably question all kinds of things. You'll have all kinds of questions and doubts. So speaking of questions and doubts, let me know, do you have any questions? Of course, I'm going to show you again, but any specific questions you have at this point?
I think everyone appreciated your little memory mnemonic there. It's very catchy.
Yes, I need those. Okay, no other questions?
No questions so far.
Okay, very good. So if we look back at the pattern, so we did row 3, which was really exciting and it had a lot of fun stuff happening, new stuff. Moving on to row 4 and all wrong side rows, you're going to knit the knits and purl the purls. So just do your knits and purls as established, nothing fancy. And then row 5, it's telling us what to do. Purl 2, knit 6, purl 2, knit 6, purl 2. But basically all that's telling us as well is just to knit the knits and purl the purls. So just remember, we're going to work everything as established until we get to row 9. So that's what I was saying. So between row 3 and row 9, we're just knitting and purling as normal. So nothing unusual or nothing exciting is happening. So you have, all those rows to kind of recover and, settle your nerves and make yourself feel better. And then when you get to row 9, that's when some more excitement happens, okay? So let's look at row 9 and see how that looks.
We do have a question before we get there.
Okay.
Beverly has a good question. Does it matter what size the holder is or what size the cable needle is?
Yes, so that's a very good question. So let me step back and we'll talk about that. So they do come in all different sizes. And I have one that's much bigger than this, and there are some that are very small. What you want to remember is your stitches are going on this needle. So this will be going through your stitches, but this is not shaping your stitches. It's just holding them. So the one thing you want to make sure of is that your cable needle is smaller than your knitting needle. So this knitting needle it's an 11. And I'm not sure what size this cable needle is, but when I look at it, it's smaller than the 11. The problem would be is if you were using like if I were using a much larger cable needle and you put your stitches on it, it's going to stretch your stitches out a little bit. And depending on, like if I was knitting socks with cables with sock yarn and tried to use this, it would be a complete mess. So the rule of thumb is your cable needle should be smaller, at least 1 or 2 sizes than your knitting needle. If it were the same size, that would probably be okay, but definitely never larger than your knitting needle, okay?
And when you say sizes, Darren, do you mean like knitting needle sizes or just generic like small, medium, large?
Well, do the cable needles come in sizes, Claire, or do they just?
They don't.
No. So
No.
yeah, just kind of eyeball it. Just like, if you're not sure, like that looks about the same size or maybe a little smaller, it would probably work. But I don't think I have like if I were knitting with this, if I were making this pattern, I certainly wouldn't want to use this needle because you can see it's clearly larger. So, go ahead and go with something that's smaller, about the same size. So that
And a
looks,
lot of sets will have multiple sizes in them. So you can
yeah.
get 3 or 4 of the same type of needle, just in different sizes.
Yeah, these two came in a set, and so did these two. There were actually 3 in this set, and they had 3 different sizes. Just make sure it's not bigger than your knitting needle. You can kind of judge it. Yeah, I don't think the cable needles are actually marked, but maybe they should be. Somebody needs to start a petition. I don't know. All right. Any other questions?
We had a request to repeat the 3rd row, but that's the same as row 9, which is what we're going to do now.
And just like TV magic, there we are on row 9, right? Okay. So one thing I do want to caution you about is you do need to make sure that you're keeping track of where you are and that you're turning your cables on the right row. Because if you're not turning them on the right row, then they could end up being all different sizes, and that might show up on your work. Sometimes it can look really good or really bad depending on what you want. But if you want it to be a nice even twist, like see how this is a nice even twist, they're all turned on the same row. And one way to help keep track of that, if you're like me and you're easily distracted, at the end or the beginning of each row, you can put a stitch marker, and then you can just count your stitch markers, and that'll help you keep track of what row you're on. Or you can put a little check mark by each row, and every time you repeat it, just put another check, or like a little tally mark or something. But you do want to, maybe you don't need to do any of those things, but I usually need to do something. And you might be thinking, well, it's so easy to count rows, like, and figure out what row you're on, and that is true. But when you're doing cable, see, that's where the cross happened. And sometimes it's hard to tell for sure, like, was it this row or this row? Like sometimes I'm never sure. Was probably down here. So you just, and until you get really good at that, it's my recommendation to always try to make sure you're doing it on the right row. Okay. So now we're on row 9, which is the same as row 3. So we're going to purl 2, which is maintaining our pattern, and we're going to 3/3 RC. So it's the exact same thing. So now you know a little bit about what that means. Purl 2, and we're going to 3/3 LC, and then finish with our purl 2. So let's do that. And now that you've seen it once, the second time you see it, it might make a little more sense. And then after we do it this time, it's going to actually start looking like something. So we're going to purl 2. Whoops, sorry. And I'm going to position my yarn. And now I'm going to do my 3/3 RC. Always refer back to your pattern if you have any doubts. So slip 3 stitches onto your cable needle, careful not to twist them. And if it's going to the right, remember, I'll be right back. And so I'm using a different cable needle this time, and you're going to kind of let them rest in that little divot. And then you can put them in the back because we want it to twist to the right. Don't drop stitches off your working needle. All right. So now I'm going to just knit 3 stitches off of my left-hand needle, just like normal. And you can see what I mean. This is what we mean by your knitting stitches out of order. These stitches shouldn't be being knitted yet, technically, if we were just working stockinette stitch. So, and then we're taking this group of stitches and moving them behind them. And again, make sure you're looking at knit stitches. Here, you're looking at knit stitches. You don't have it twisted by mistake. And then I'm going to knit 3 stitches off of my cable needle. Make sure it's in the right place. Sometimes it's hard managing your yarn when you're first doing this, but just take your time and always make sure your yarn's in the right position. All right. So that looks pretty exciting, right? You can kind of see if they're twisting, and by the time you do another one, it'll be really, you'll really be established. And so now I'm going to purl 2. Okay, and then now we have to do a 3/3 LC. Now the 3/3, remember, is telling us we're going to be crossing 3 stitches over 3 stitches. And sometimes you might look at a pattern and it might say 4/4, 6/6. It could be any number of stitches that the designer has decided for, but that's what those numbers are telling us. So I'm going to slip 3 stitches onto my cable needle, and I'm using the smaller one this time to just show you that the size of the cable needle is kind of irrelevant. So put 3 on, and then I'm going to have this twist to the left. So I left the front door open. So if I want it to go to the left, I have to hold it to the front. And you can kind of, if you want to, you can kind of anchor it like that to kind of keep it out of the way. Kind of stick it in there. And then get your yarn in the right position. And now I'm going to knit 3 from my left hand needle. And then release this needle. And make sure you're looking at knit stitches. You didn't twist it. I'm going to knit 3 off of my cable needle. 1, and then finish with my purl 2. And then we'll look at that, and I want to show you what the back looks like. So now that I've got 2 cable twists complete, we're going to look at a few things on this. But first, do we have any questions? So you can see now how that cable is shaping up. And then the next one, it'll just continue on like that. Any questions?
No questions coming up so far. We did have Abby says that she appreciates that she's not the only one who drops stitches. I think it happens to all of us. So
Yes, it happens. It's easy to do on a cable because you're not always looking at that other needle. So just be careful. Okay. All right. So if there are no questions, I do want to look at the back just so that you know what you're looking at. So the back of cables never really looks very nice. It always kind of looks like, you know, the wrong side of something. There is such a thing called reversible cables that look the same on the front and the back. So if you want to do further research, you can look up reversible cables. And that's a little more experienced, but it's not that hard. So when you're working on the back, what you want to remember is you just want to knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches. And you need to know what a knit stitch looks like and a purl stitch looks like. So remember, the knit stitch looks like the V shape, and then the purl stitch is bumped up tight against your knitting needle like that. So, and they're pretty easy to spot here because they do form these columns going up the back. So you've got your knit stitches that are forming their columns going straight up. Okay. So when you're working on the back, use the same knitting needle, you're just doing the stitches as you come to them. So you really don't even need to refer to the pattern necessarily for the back, but you do want to keep track of what line you're on. I'll finish this real quickly and then we'll look at the front. While I'm knitting across, are there any other questions?
The material of the cable needles, is, metal is probably the slipperiest one. So for your first project, would you recommend something like plastic or wood instead?
Wooden ones are the least slippery, so they might be nice. I this is my personal opinion. I really like the J-shaped ones, these U-shaped ones, because they kind of stay out of the way, and they don't slip off as much because they really rest up in that curve. Which kind do you like best, Claire?
I think I have bamboo and wooden ones, and I use them mostly.
Which shape do you like?
I like the ones that are more straight with just a little dip or those grooves in them.
Yeah, yeah, and they're very nice too. You can use a double pointed needle if you don't have anything else handy, but you don't want it to be too long because then it's kind of unwieldy and it gets in the way. Okay, so finishing my last two are knits because I'm working on the wrong side. Now, when we turn this over, just by finishing one more row, that kind of relaxes that twist and gives it a little bit more, um, fabric to work with. And now you can see how pretty it looks. It gives you um, that nice shaping. And frequently with cables, you'll have um, rows of purl stitches in between the cables that help define the cables. So look for that. So like you can see on this sweater, here's a row of cables. I have rows of purl stitches, two more cables patterns here, then rows of purl stitches. That just really kind of defines the cables and helps them to stand out. It kind of pops them out and makes them a little more three-dimensional because the purl stitches look like they're kind of falling in the background. If you don't have any purl stitches and you just have cables right next to each other or some stockinette stitch, maybe just knit stitches, it can also be a very pretty look. It's much more subtle. And I've heard that called a blind cable. So you just don't have um, the trenches of purl stitch defining it as well. So it's a more subtle look. So if you want to work up a swatch and try something like that just to see what it looks like, sometimes it's fun to just experiment. Okay. Any other questions that we have on this or how we got here?
Jennifer wants to know if you can use circular needles for a project with cables. I'm not sure if she's asking if you can use the circular needle as a cable needle or make cables for projects knitting around.
All right, so let's look here. This is a swatch that I was working on, and it's knitted flat, and I'm using circular needles to knit flat. So absolutely you can. You could also, I don't see any reason why you couldn't use a circular needle as a cable needle. What do you think, Claire? I mean, it might kind of get like a little bit in the way, but
Yeah, if you had a shorter circular needle, you could. Yes, but she clarified not as a cable needle, so for a project knitting around, like your hat.
and so here's a little swatch I was working up in the round, and I'm doing cables, just this very simple cable that we did. I'm doing a 2/2. So this, and it's leaning to the left. So if this were written out, it would be 2/2 LC. And all of my cables are the same. So I just did all of them the same. So they're all twisting in the same direction. And when they're all twisting in the same direction, I think it looks more like a spiral. When you have them twisting in opposite directions like this, sometimes you don't see the spiral. Sometimes your eye kind of goes to this type of a movement, and I'll show you that on another swatch. So just different types of, yeah, but you can most certainly use circular needles. You could do magic loop. You can do it on double pointed needles, whatever you want to do for the project you're doing, whatever the best one is. And this yarn I was using True, and you can get this at Michael's or at lionbrand.com or michaels.com. It's really nice to work with. I use two strands held together to make it a little bit thicker. Okay, any other questions?
Everyone thinks the hat is very cute.
Yeah, I'm never going to finish it. I just started it really as a swatch for this class, and I thought I'd finish it, and I probably won't now. I'll just use it for the class. So it is fun to do though. Thank you. So this is our next one. So if you have the handout, and if you want to go to the next one, this is called a horseshoe pattern. And you can see the cables kind of form a horseshoe. And that's kind of what I was talking about before, how if there are no purl stitches that separate our cable twists are here and here. And so because they're right up next to each other, it forms a different shape. Now, to create this shape, you're not going to be doing anything different than what you've already learned. You'll just be doing it in a different order. So this one is leaning to the right, and this one is leaning to the left. And so let's look at the chart. One thing I do like to tell people when you're reading a chart, which I'm going to review how to read the chart, you can use Post-it notes like this to help keep track of where you are in your chart. So you can kind of block out everything else except your row, or you can just put one right under your row or right above it. So sometimes it's easier to help keep your eye in the right place. So that's a little trick from me to you. But reading a chart, if you've never read a chart before, it might seem a little intimidating at first, but once you understand, it's actually quite easy. The numbers that you're going to see here indicate where you start. So the number 1 is right here. So this is where you're going to start, and you're going to read the chart. You're going to go across, up to number 2, across, up to number 3, back across, and you're going to continue in that motion reading your chart. Now, what you're going to try to picture is this chart is a representation of the front of your work. So these are, and it tells us right here, you look for the key. These asterisks each one of these boxes represents one stitch. Each one of these represent one stitch. And the asterisk means you're going to purl on the right side and knit on the wrong side. So you're going to purl on the right side, and when you're on the wrong side, you're going to knit. The empty boxes with nothing mean you're going to knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side. And then, of course, we have these crazy looking signals right here. And that is our 3/3 LC. So it's the same thing we did. It's just written in a different way. And we have 3/3 RC. So it's exactly the same. And if you look here, we have 3 little slashes, and that tells us we're going to be working with 3 stitches. And we have 3 slashes. These little dashes separate them. So we have 3 slashes over here. So we're going to be crossing 3 over 3. And if you look at that, it's leaning to the right. So that is a clue for us. So it's leaning to the right. So that is a right cross cable. So we'll hold our needle in the back. Same thing over here. This one is leaning to the left. We have 3 stitches and then 3 stitches leaning to the left. That is a left crossing cable, 3 over 3. So that's a good way of trying to figure out what you're doing. And that's pretty much it. We're just knitting and purling, and we're going to work the chart as indicated. So what I do want to remind you is looking at all of this can seem a little overwhelming. But once you establish like the first and second row and you get your knits and your purls all lined up, you're really just going to be following your knits and your purls. And the only time you're doing anything new is on row 3. And then if you want to keep repeating this, so you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows, and then you'll do it again. So every 9 rows, you have a cable twist. And that's it. Other than that, you're just knitting and purling just like you always have. And by doing that, you'll create this real pretty little horseshoe pattern. Okay, so let me show you. I have this swatch worked up right where I'm going to do my twist. Before I move on, are there any questions about the chart? Because charts, once you get into them, they're not hard to read, but they do seem a bit intimidating at first. So any questions?
We had some appreciation for your post-it note tip there.
Yeah, I love a post-it note.
Gail asked, why does row 9 not show the slashes? We're using a different cable pattern now. So this isn't the same as the swatch Darren was showing previously.
Oh, yeah. So let me this it's a whole new pattern. So this one is what we did before. We're done with that. We've moved on. And this is a whole new pattern. So now we're doing this, and before we were doing this. So you can see they look quite different. This one has these twists right here. You can see them twisting. And this one has more of the horseshoe kind of look. All right. And the reason why it only has one, this is a repeating chart. So it has rows 1 through 10. And if you want to have just one kind of cable, it would kind of just look like that. Then you would only do rows 1 through 10. But each one of these horseshoe shapes are rows 1 through 10. So just by repeating the same rows over and over again, that's how you create this shape. And to create this shape, you only have the cable crossing one time. All cable patterns are going to be different, and they're all going to create all kinds of interesting shapes. But what you have to remember is the main thing you're doing is going to always be the same. All right. So let's see how this is going to work out. So looking at my chart, I'm worked up to row 3. So I have to asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. So that means purl on the right side. And then I have my 3/3. It's leaning to the right. And so that means it's a 3/3 RC. So let's get started. And once you start, and you can see here, if you come here, you're just going to purl automatically. You know they're purls, you've been purling, you're just going to know what to do. It's very intuitive. So we're going to just do our 3 purls here. Just like normal, nothing fancy. 3 purls. And then 3/3, use the metal one this time. So I'm going to slide 3 stitches on. Okay, 3 stitches on without twisting. And this is going to the right. So remember, I'll be right back. So be right back. We're going to put that in the back. I'm getting my yarn all tangled up. Now, position your yarn so it's in the right place to knit. Whoops. And then we're going to knit 3. Okay. Knit 3. And then I'm going to knit 3 from my cable needle. So give yourself a little extra room there so it doesn't slip off. Sometimes you kind of have to stretch it. You kind of have to stretch it over. And get everything. Make sure you're looking at knit stitches, that you're not twisting it. And after you practice a bit, that'll be less of a problem. So 1, 2, and I'm just making a swatch. So I have a knot in my yarn and I'm just leaving it because this is just a practice swatch. If you were really making it and you came to a knot, you'd probably want to go back to the beginning of the row and restart your new ball of yarn at the beginning. You probably wouldn't want to do it like I just did there, but we're just practicing today, so it's probably all right. But if you're really making a project, that would probably come out. All right, so one thing I do want to point out to you here is I have my 3/3 RC leaning to the right, and then I'm moving directly right into a 3/3 LC. There are no purl stitches in between here. So Sometimes there are purl stitches that divide your cables and sometimes there are not. So make sure you're reading your chart carefully. So I'm going to slip 3 stitches on without twisting. And this one's going to the left. So I left the front door open. So if I left, it's going to hold in the front. And then I'm going to knit 3 stitches off of my working needle. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now I have to work the 3 stitches off of my cable needle. And one thing I've done before when I wasn't paying attention is I've just left that cable needle behind and then just finished the row. And then you're like, oh no. So just make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing and you're not daydreaming. Cautionary tale. So I'm going to knit my 3 stitches off of my cable needle. If you can learn from my mistakes, maybe you won't have to make them and you go along a lot faster. Okay. And my needle fell out. So that happens a lot to me when I'm knitting like this because there's only 3 stitches. So just no big deal. Just slide them right back on. Everything's fine. And then we're going to finish off by purling. The last 3. All right. Now, every time you finish a row of cables, I want you to stop what you're doing and stretch it out on your knitting needle. Let it kind of relax into shape and make sure that you did everything right. Because if you did it wrong, if you crossed this, if you held this in the front instead of the back and it was leaning the wrong way, now's the time to fix it. You don't want to realize that you made that mistake down here. And then you either have to rip it all the way back and unravel your work, which is no fun. You can also fix it by, let's say I had a mistake right here or here. You can knit across until you get to those stitches, drop them off of your needle, unravel everything down to here, and then as you're picking the stitches back up, crossing everything in the right direction. And it's a bit complicated, and you certainly want to do that when you have peace and quiet and a nice bright light. But it's certainly something I've had to do it in the past. Have you ever had to do that, Claire?
I have done that a few times, and yes, you definitely want a nice, quiet environment where you can concentrate on what you're doing.
Yes, it's not a fun day, but if you stop after every cable and just take a second and look at it and be like, okay, so it's going like this, looks like it's right. And then you can catch your mistake now because it's so much easier to unknit one row than to unravel all the way back, okay? And then as you can see, the back of the cable is not very exciting. But once you get to the back, and this is what I was telling you before, you don't really need to live by that chart if it's confusing to you because you're just going to knit your knits. So you're just going to knit the first 3, purl all the way across, and then knit the last 3. And what you want to make sure you're doing, though, is keeping track of how many rows you're working because you don't want to cross your cable on the wrong row. All right. Any questions about anything up to this point?
I will say that we've got about 10 minutes left in class here. I'm going to put the handout in the chat again in case anyone needs this. And just a reminder that this is being recorded, so you can watch it back again tomorrow if you need to cover something else.
And if you run into any problems, you can contact me on social media. Maybe Claire will put my name in the chat, my screen name. It's Mr. Woolly Bear. So it's Mr. spelled out M-I-S-T-E-R Woolly Bear. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok. So if you send me a direct message, I usually respond pretty quick. And on Facebook, it's just my name. If you search my name, it'll come up and you'll see me. And just send me a direct message and try to get back to you as quick as I can. And if you make anything, I'd love to see it. So if you want to, if you do post on social media, you could tag me in it. I'd love to see what you make. Be exciting. Oops, sorry. So any questions? I was expecting more questions. Everyone must be advanced. Has anyone done cables before? Or is this the first try? Keep bumping that, sorry.
We've had a couple people comment that, oh, cable things look so complicated, but now that they've watched this class, it's much easier than you might think.
I mean, yeah, that's the good news and the bad news about cables. When I first learned cables, I was going on vacation. I took yarn with me. I thought I'm going to spend a whole week learning how to do cables. And once I got into it, it only took about an hour. But then after I learned how and practiced a little bit, I was ready to make a project. So that's the good news, that, you know, it's actually so easy. But remember, that's the knitter's secret. We don't tell non-knitters how easy it is because it looks very complex. So we keep that secret to ourselves. Okay, so as you can see on the back, I just knitted my knits and purled my purls. I didn't have to refer to my chart at all, but you might want to, since now I just finished, um, so I just finished my crossover. I did row 3 and I came back across from working on the back. So I finished row 4. Now I'm on row 5. And if you want to put little dash marks next to each row as you do it, or a check mark, or kind of whatever, maybe you don't need to do anything. Maybe you've got a, maybe you're very alert and sharp, but that's not my life. Okay, so as you can see, and I changed yarns here because I ran out of my other yarn, but um, you could change colors mid cable. Like you could switch to red or black or something, and it could be really pretty. All right, any questions? We've got about 8 minutes. We want to look at the next one.
I see a lot of people saying that they've avoided cables and that this makes them look so easy, and I'm glad. They are pretty easy, and I think they're very fun to do.
They are fun to do. So for the people that have been avoiding cables because they look so hard, I'm going to challenge them. I want them to watch some videos on lace and on Fair Isle knitting, because guess what? They're not so hard either. If you do a simple pattern, you can do lace, you can do Fair Isle, you can do anything. So most things in knitting are not as hard as they look. If you start out with a simple pattern, of course, it can be super complex once the patterns get more sophisticated. But that's kind of a rule in knitting. Like things just are much easier than they look. It looks so impressive.
2 questions before we move on. Is there supposed to be a hole there where you've crossed the cable?
I don't know if there's supposed to be, but there always is, right? Would you say there's supposed to be, or I mean, it's just life. That's just real life.
I mean, it's going to be a bigger hole in some, or a bigger gap in some instances based on the size of the yarn and how many stitches are in the cable, but you're sort of physically separating the stitches into layers. And so there's a gap there always a little bit. And in a tiny cable like that, it's a lot harder to see, but
Yeah.
you could slide your needle between those layers of stitches.
Yeah, so there is a hole there, but because these stitches are so small, and I'm only crossing 2 over 2, you don't really see that gap, but it is there. And with big yarn like this, great big yarn, then you're going to have that hole. But that's all. I wouldn't, don't let that bother you. It's not going to make your sweater or your scarf or your hat less warm. The cables, are, in fact, are going to make it very, very warm. Yeah, so you
And then
will
the
have that
second
hole.
question, oh, sorry, Darren.
Yeah.
The second question was about your little hat. Is there a pattern?
No pattern. I just cast on, did the math, started knitting. It's all, nope. Sorry about that. Nope. I don't usually like to use a pattern, actually. So I don't like to be told what to do. Right, so now we just have a few minutes left, but I wanted to show you one more thing. This is a honeycomb pattern, and I think this pattern is very nice. It's very cute. It's quite warm, and it makes a beautiful like panel on a sweater, or you could do a whole, I have a whole sweater made out of this, or I did have. And it's the same basic principle, what we were doing, only it is just doing things in different orders, but it's exactly the same thing. And this one is written in a little bit different way, and it's a little bit confusing to me. If you look here, you have 2 stitches crossing over 2 stitches, and they are leaning to the left. But this big diagonal line in the middle is leaning to the right. So what that's telling us is it is a 4-stitch crossover, and it's crossing to the right. So we want to look at this diagonal line as what's indicating which one it is crossing. Same thing here. These are leaning to the right, but this diagonal line is leaning to the left, and that is in. So to me, that's very confusing because I want to look at the stitches. I want to see which way the stitches are moving. So what I'm going to tell you is when you're reading your guide, when you're reading the key, make sure you're looking at the symbols and associating them with the right kind of crossover. All right. And what I did to help keep myself on track, because again, I'm easily distracted, I put a B for hold it in the back and an F to hold it in the front. And then as you can see right up above it, we're going to switch. We're going to hold it in the front, and here we're going to hold it in the back. So this is a little different. We're doing things in a little different order, but it's the exact same thing. And I'll show you, I have a swatch worked up with that. And I'll show you how cute it is. Isn't that cute? And if you just isolate it to looking at one cable, but if you just isolate it, so let me put this here. So here is just one cable. And as you can see, it's not really twisting because it's going to the right and then to the left and then to the right and then to the left. All it's doing is just making a zigzag. So if you wanted to make like a snake or a vine or maybe the branch of a tree, you can cross these in any direction you want, and you could write words. If you're super clever. Claire, did you make that sweater that forms a deer or a skull or something?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so just by turning these in the proper way, you can make pictures, you can do anything. But when you look at something and you see how complicated it is, just remember you're just holding your cable needle in the front or in the back. You just have to keep track of where you are in the chart. Wouldn't you say that's the key, Claire?
Yes, knowing where you are in the chart is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. So just by going to holding it in the front, holding it in the back, holding it in the front, holding it in the back, you create these curvy lines. And when you line those curvy lines up next to each other, see, there are no purl stitches on my honeycomb pattern. So they're all right next to each other. And what you get are these honeycombs. And it's almost like magic when you're doing it, but it's super fun. But it's the exact same thing that you've been doing, that we've been talking about today. You're just holding it in the front or holding it in the back. That's pretty much it for cables, isn't it, Claire?
Pretty much, yes. Their
And then
stitches are just plain leapfrog.
Yep, and then just practicing chart reading. So start with some simple charts, or if you like directions that are written out better, just start with some simple ones and keep practicing. I like it when you have a chart and written directions, because if you don't understand something in one or the other, you can kind of compare them and it's easy to figure out. But I don't know if you always get both. Probably usually a chart, right, Claire, for complicated things?
For complicated things, it's more common to have a chart because it's easier to write it out or to picture it that way.
Yeah.
We do have a question on the honeycomb table here. What are the transition rows like? So what are the rows between the tables?
So in this one, you have an 8-row repeat, and you're crossing, so you cross here on row 1, and then you have 1, 2, 3 rows of just normal knitting, and then you're doing a cross on row 5. And then you have 1, 2, 3 rows of normal knitting, and then you come back down here to row 1, and you have your crossover again. So you're just repeating this little chart as many times as you want. And one thing I do want to show you, if you're going to use this little chart to make a honeycomb, what this little chart is showing you is 1 cross this way and 1 cross that way. If you just follow that chart, all you're going to get is just this. You'll just get this, which is kind of cute. I mean, that could be worked up into a design. If you just had this going up the front of a sweater, that could be super cute. So if you want to have the honeycombs fitting next to each other like this, you're going to have to, it's an 8-stitch repeat. So you don't want to count these. This is just your border. And you see this darker black line is going around just the 8 stitches. So you would cast on 8, 16, 24, 32. So it would have to be a number that's divisible by 8. And that way you would end up with, I cast on, I think 18 here. And then of course, then you're edging. So you would cast on whatever you want here, and then whatever you need for your edging. Does that make sense? So I think if you practice that, you'll get it. But that's the stitch repeat right here. Okay, anything else? Because that's probably really confusing.
And then for this cable, all of the cable stitches themselves are worked in stockinette stitch, right?
Usually,
I mean, for this particular chart, yes.
Oh, for this chart,
knitting,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, all of these are just knits on the front and purls on the back, except for your edging. And you wouldn't have to do an edging. If you did this in the round, made a hat like this, there would be no edging. But yeah, so it's just a knit on the front. So the shaded ones are knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. And then these, even though they're not shaded, but they're special because they have these marks in them. And it's telling you down here to knit them. So just don't get confused about that. I do recommend that you look at the chart, read the key, and then associate the written directions with the symbols and make sure you understand that before you start. It can be a little confusing at first, but if like I like to write notes, and sometimes I'll write out how many, like if there's more than 3, like if there's 10 rows in between it, sometimes I'll number them to kind of help keep track of where I am. Any kind of thing to help make it easier for you.
All right, and we are a little over time here, but I'm going to put the handout in the chat once more in case anyone needs that again. And another reminder that the recording will be available tomorrow afternoon to watch there. We're going to be off for the next couple of weeks, but we'll be back later in July with more classes for you.
Okay. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me on social media. All right, thanks for coming to class. Have a great night. Don't forget to practice.